I'm a carpenter, and I would like to share my experience that I've had through my lifetime. I started to be a carpenter when I was 20, and I'm 70 now, so that can tell you that I've got about 50 years experience. I'd like to tell you why I started in the trade and how I got started, and the reason I would like to express these things is so that the skill and knowledge that I've gained through my lifetime won't go into the grave with me. I'd like to share it, that it may help someone who is starting out or someone who has worked as a carpenter and has just not had the technical advantage that schooling would bring you. When I was 20 years old, I had a daughter, and my wife was pregnant, and I needed to find some way to support my family. I knew that I couldn't make it in the place I was. I was told all my life that I was going to be an engineer, and I started into college, and I discovered that I was not going to be an engineer because as I thought about it, I thought engineer work would be mostly in an office, which would not suit my purposes in life at all. So I'd been thinking quite a bit about what exactly I wanted to do with my life. And so happened that a fellow that went to church with me worked at an area prison where I lived. And he usually had a man go with him, and for one reason or another, this fella was not able to go to the prison with him this particular Sunday, so he asked me to go. And as he talked to the boys there, it was a youth situation in this prison. He told them how to find a trade in their life, and the lesson kind of sunk in on me. And that lesson was that first you've got to think about things you like to do. You got to think about how to get into the line of work that you want to get into. It has to be something that will make you a living, and it has to be something you enjoy, and that was my main motives. There was another religious aspect to that, in that after you think about it and decide, you have to ask your Father in heaven if that's the thing that you should be doing with your life. So I knew that I liked to drive nails from my youth. I knew that I liked to dig holes, and I knew that I liked to be outside. So these are the reasons that I became a carpenter to start with. Now, the way that I got into the carpenter trade was I went to the local union, and it was quite a while. It was in the springtime. This was about January or February when I decided I was going to be a carpenter. And it was up into about April when I finally got in to take the test. They only gave the test once a year, and they only took 6 people per year. And it was a really hard thing to crack because all the old carpenters' sons wanted in those apprenticeship slots. And for an outsider like myself to get in, it was not easy. The only reason I got in was because I made a high score on the test. I've been watching quite a few videos lately about carpenter work, and I find that those videos sometimes lack the technical things that you really need to know as a carpenter. And I hope that I can say something. I hope to make a whole series of videos to explain different phases of the work and how they come to pass. I had quite a bit of different picture of carpentry work before I got into the actual work. I pictured myself working on a house, clean environment. I didn't suspect the difficulty, the hard work that was involved in being a carpenter. First day of work as a carpenter, I went into a steel mill for a contractor. We were putting a precipitator onto a basic oxygen furnace, and it was nasty, it was dirty, and they sent me down into a hole about 25 foot deep, I was sawing 4x6s with a handsaw, and I spent a whole week in that hole sawing those 4x6s for what we call a stiff back on concrete forms. And that's one thing I'd like to mention about carpentry. It's a wide field. There's lots of different areas of the trade that you can work in. And I've worked in a lot of those different areas. I've worked in industrial plants, a lot of concrete work, a lot of scaffold work. I've worked on bridges. I've worked on hospitals. I've worked on schools. I've worked in malls and stores. I've worked in high-rise apartment buildings. I've worked on houses. I've been an apprentice carpenter, and I have a certificate that shows that I graduated from that apprenticeship and am officially qualified to be a journeyman. However, if you check the union membership where I'm a member, it says that all my classifications all my certifications are expired. So as much as I've worked at the trade, I'm not qualified anymore according to the certifications. However, I taught apprentice school for 10 years, 7 years in one local and 3 years in another. And I was asked to go teach at the training center when our apprenticeship shifted from a local basis to a big training center situation where we attended apprentice class. At one time we did it on 2 nights a week, Monday and Wednesday, for 3 hours, and then it shifted to 6 hours on Saturday. So I would go into a classroom and talk about carpentry for 6 hours on Saturday, 26 weeks out of the year. We had to offer 162 hours per year to stay within the state guidelines of a recognized apprentice program. And if you were offered 162 hours, you had to attend at least 144 hours to pass. I've enjoyed my trade, and I've worked in many phases of it, from hanging doors to interior systems to house building to commercial work of all kinds to industrial plants to refineries, you name it, I've been there. Now, as I make videos, I would like to, when I start for real, not just talking about it, I would like to do it like I taught my apprentice classes. When I taught apprentices, I would start with a blueprint, and we'd talk about what was on each page, where the job would start, and where the skills needed would fit into each page as we went through the blueprints and what we needed to know to accomplish those things. As the years have gone by, our tools have changed. Our methods have changed somewhat, although it's still basically the same things. We measure, we fasten, and we cut. And that's basically the carpenter trade. However, it covers things like ship carpenters, millwrights. There's just many phases that carpenters actually cover. My experience is a lot different than some of the people I've watched on videos, and in my trade I have had to study a lot, and I think that I've accomplished a good living at it, and I've never had a minute that I didn't enjoy the trade as a whole. There's been a lot of trying situations, such as weather. When it's below zero and you're trying to work, it's very hard. When it's hot and you've got a lot of lumber to move, it's hard. But there are times when the work isn't quite as bad, like when we're putting up ceiling, the stuff is not as heavy. When we're hanging doors, you don't have to go as fast as when you're framing. When you work for a contractor who pushes too hard, it's not as much fun as when you work for a contractor who is a little more easygoing. And I have been fortunate enough to be able to be a contractor myself. I've been fortunate enough to be a carpenter foreman on different jobs. I've been a superintendent for a couple companies on some jobs. And I've had an all-around career that was exciting. My last real carpenter job was in an amusement park, which was an excellent job, the cream of the crop for any carpenter. Now, if you're a carpenter that is just on the job with no apprenticeship training, it's hard to find time. On the job, that it's never expressed very much in detail about the technical part, how to figure concrete, how to figure rafters, how to figure stairways, what parts of the blueprints you need to go to find detailed information, and that sort of thing. And I hope to express those things in coming videos to a point that I can relay the experience and knowledge that I've gained through my lifetime